I want you to think about this. Allegedly, Sean Carter is responsible for enacting Hype Williams to put Aaliyah on a faulty plane to move her out the way as punishment for rejecting him, and so he could level up Beyonce.
Now, here's where the gravity of the situation hits its peak. This isn't just a story about a tragic plane crash, missing money, or even celebrity feuds. It's about the inner workings of power in an industry that has long thrived on secrecy, loyalty, and control. Nicki Minaj's allegations, if true, illuminate a system where careers are meticulously orchestrated, where women who threaten that order are silenced or erased, and where those at the top maintain dominance by making sure no one else can rise without their consent. The stakes aren't just financial, they're existential. Artists, managers, and even powerful executives exist in an ecosystem where one wrong move could end a career or worse. Consider the implications. Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, Left Eye, and now Nicki Minaj, all women who were in positions of visibility, talent, and influence, suddenly become casualties, witnesses, or whistleblowers. Each of their stories intersects with powerful men, carefully curated events, and untouchable institutions. The pattern suggests that the industry doesn't just create stars, it selects who survives, who thrives, and who disappears. And for years, this system operated largely without consequence, hidden behind legal shields, media narratives, and public adoration. Now, however, the veil is lifting and the consequences could be seismic. Nicki Minaj isn't acting out of mere anger over money. The $200 million she claims was withheld is symbolic of a much broader principle: the cost of speaking out, the price of challenging a system that thrives on compliance, and the power dynamics that dictate who succeeds and who fails. By coming forward, she isn't just seeking compensation, she's demanding accountability, transparency, and a reckoning for actions that were long ignored or normalized. And in doing so, she's putting herself directly in the crosshairs of the most powerful players in the music industry, those who have spent decades ensuring that their influence remains absolute. The Epstein files tie into this larger narrative in a chilling way. The mere presence of Jay-Z's name alongside figures like Harvey Weinstein in FBI tips underscores the existence of networks where women have been systematically silenced, coerced, or endangered. When you combine that with the suspicious timing of Aaliyah's death, Beyoncé's meteoric rise, and Jay-Z's documented obsession, the picture is not only disturbing, it's damning. These aren't isolated incidents. They are part of a potential framework of influence, manipulation, and control.
Apparently, Nicki Minaj has dragged Jay-Z to filth. She blasts him for being evil and spiteful.
The broader pattern becomes even more disturbing when you step back and look at it from the perspective of systemic power. Nicki Minaj isn't just calling out Jay-Z for alleged financial misconduct. She's exposing what she claims is a methodology, a blueprint for how influence is maintained in the upper echelons of the music industry. If her claims are accurate, Aaliyah's death wasn't merely a tragic accident. It was a symptom of a system where obstacles to power, whether they're people, careers, or rivalries, are systematically removed. And this system isn't just about individual ambition. It's about creating a hierarchy where loyalty, silence, and complicity are the currency of survival. Those who refuse to play along risk being erased, both professionally and personally. Think about the timing and the implications. Aaliyah dies in August 2001, a star on the cusp of her full potential. 2 years later, Beyoncé's solo career explodes, reshaping the entire R&B landscape. Coincidence? Maybe, but Nicki's framing suggests a pattern, one artist's absence directly clearing the path for another's rise. This pattern isn't isolated. History is littered with sudden disappearances, untimely deaths, and carefully managed narratives that serve the interests of those in power. Left Eye, Whitney Houston, and now Aaliyah, each story comes with unanswered questions, each end suspiciously advantageous to the right people. And now, for the first time, someone with Minaj's platform is connecting these dots publicly. Her fight isn't just about money either. While the $200 million she claims from the title sale is significant, it represents only the surface of what she's describing. It's about exposure, about revealing how careers can be manipulated, how young talent can be silenced or erased, and how systems of control protect certain individuals at all costs. The financial angle becomes a vehicle for something much bigger: truth. And that truth is dangerous for the very people who have spent years building an untouchable image. Silence has been their armor. Minaj's allegations are the chink in that armor. And let's not forget the Epstein connection. Jay-Z's name appearing in FBI tips alongside Harvey Weinstein isn't a trivial detail. It's evidence of association within a network where women have historically been silenced, coerced, or endangered. When you layer that on top of the plane crash, the sudden rise of Beyoncé, and the alleged financial manipulations, a picture emerges that is deeply unsettling. It suggests a coordinated system of influence where tragedies, manipulations, and silence are all tools used to consolidate power.
Sweetest person you can know, very intelligent. She knew what she was about and she knew what she wanted to do with her.
Now, this is where things take an even darker turn. The Epstein files are no longer just whispers in the background. They're an uncomfortable, undeniable piece of context that ties multiple powerful figures together in ways the public hasn't fully processed. Nicki Minaj's claims gain a new level of gravity when you factor in her suggestion that Jay-Z's name appears in connection with those files. These weren't casual social encounters. They are allegations of situations where victims claim they were incapacitated while in the presence of men with immense power. That kind of association casts an entirely different light on the previous narratives we thought we understood. Aaliyah's tragic plane crash, the rapid rise of Beyoncé, and the alleged financial betrayals start to look less like coincidence and more like elements of a systematic pattern of control, manipulation, and protection within elite circles. This isn't about isolated incidents, it's about a network. Powerful men who operate above the law, whose decisions ripple outward to affect careers, lives, and legacies. The insinuation isn't just that Jay-Z may have been personally involved in individual acts of exploitation, but that he moved within a sphere where those acts were normalized, covered up, or ignored to protect mutual interests. It paints a world where women who get too close to the truth, or who threaten to disrupt the flow of power, face consequences that are both professional and personal. And in this context, the plane crash doesn't feel like a random tragedy. It feels like a convenient solution within a broader ecosystem designed to remove obstacles and protect certain figures. Nicki's framing also highlights a critical dynamic, the silence from those around these events. Beyoncé's camp, Jay-Z's representatives, the various industry executives, none have publicly disputed these claims or offered detailed rebuttals. In the world of celebrity, silence often speaks louder than words. When accused of minor wrongs, public figures typically respond immediately with denials, lawsuits, or statements. When the accusations are as severe as Minaj's, the silence becomes deafening. It implies a recognition that responding could draw more attention, potentially exposing connections that certain parties would rather keep buried. The longer the quiet persists, the more it resembles tacit acknowledgement rather than innocence.
So tell me about your relationship with Beyoncé, because she's on a track here.
You know, everybody asks me that.
Well, then I shouldn't.
But here is where the story takes a turn that shifts it from rumor into something far more layered and psychologically complex: timing. Not just when events allegedly happened, but when people choose to speak about them. Because in public controversies, timing is rarely random. It can be strategic, emotional, reactive, or sometimes simply coincidental, but audiences almost always assume there is intention behind it. When someone steps forward with claims years after an event, the first question people ask is never just what they're saying. It's why now? That question becomes its own subplot, often overshadowing the original allegation. Observers start examining motives, incentives, grudges, alliances, and personal stakes. They analyze past interviews, old posts, and prior relationships, searching for clues that might explain the moment of disclosure. In high-profile disputes, timing can be influenced by many factors. Contracts expire. Partnerships dissolve. Financial disagreements surface. Personal relationships change. Careers rise or stall. Any of these shifts can transform someone from a quiet insider into a vocal critic. And when that transformation happens publicly, it can look dramatic, even if the underlying tension existed for years. There is also the reality that people who operate within powerful industries often remain silent until they feel secure enough to speak. Security can mean financial independence, legal protection, public support, or simply distance from the environment they once depended on. When those conditions change, voices that were once cautious sometimes become outspoken. To outside observers, it may appear sudden. To the person speaking, it may feel long overdue. Another layer to consider is leverage. In disputes involving money, rights, or reputation, information itself can become a form of currency. Not necessarily proof of wrongdoing, just knowledge, experiences, or insider perspective. The suggestion that someone possesses information can carry almost as much weight as the information itself, especially in the public arena, where perception often shapes reality faster than facts do. This is why statements hinting at revealing everything tend to capture attention so quickly. They create anticipation. They spark debate. They generate headlines before any actual evidence appears. Whether intentional or not, such hints function like narrative cliffhangers, keeping audiences watching and waiting for the next development. At the same time, it's crucial to separate implication from confirmation. A claim that something will be revealed is not the same as revealing it. Public history is filled with moments when dramatic promises of exposure never materialized into substantiated proof. There are also instances where revelations did surface, but only after long investigations and independent verification. Until that verification happens, any assertion remains exactly that, an assertion. The digital age amplifies this tension between claim and confirmation. Social platforms reward immediacy, emotion, and bold statements. Careful verification, on the other hand, takes time, often far more time than the online attention cycle allows. As a result, audiences sometimes form strong opinions before reliable information is even available. There is also a psychological dimension at play. People tend to interpret statements through the lens of their existing beliefs. Supporters of one figure may dismiss accusations instantly. Critics may accept them just as quickly. Neutral observers may feel pulled in both directions, uncertain what to believe. In that sense, public controversies become less about facts alone and more about competing narratives. And narratives, once established, are remarkably difficult to change. Even when new information emerges, early impressions can linger. First versions of a story often leave the deepest imprint, which is why the initial framing of any allegation or defense can shape public perception long before investigations, documents, or official findings enter the picture. So the real question surrounding moments like this isn't simply whether claims are true or false. It's how they function in the broader ecosystem of influence, reputation, and timing. Because sometimes the impact of a statement comes not from what it proves, but from what it makes people wonder. In the end, the power of such moments lies in uncertainty. Not certainty. Not proof. Uncertainty is what keeps audiences watching, debating, and speculating. It's what turns a single statement into an ongoing saga. And until verifiable facts arrive, if they ever do, the story doesn't truly resolve. It just pauses, suspended between possibility and proof, while the world waits to see whether the next chapter brings revelation, retraction, or silence once again.
But there are people who have been indicted in the public space, and it hasn't been true. And so I think Jay-Z's tone was exactly. But see, I saw Puffy say the same, and then a video came out.
Yeah.
What makes moments like these so powerful isn't just the claims, the whispers, or even the unanswered questions. It's the silence that surrounds them. Silence has a strange way of amplifying speculation. When people expect answers and none arrive, imagination rushes in to fill the void. And in the modern media landscape, silence doesn't calm the storm, it often intensifies it. The longer clarity takes, the louder the theories grow, echoing through comment sections, reaction videos, live stream debates, and late-night discussions among fans trying to piece together their own version of events. Public figures know this dynamic well. Every statement they release, every word they choose, even every pause between responses can be interpreted as meaningful. A denial can be dissected. A refusal to comment can be seen as suspicious. Even a carefully neutral response can be read as strategic. In a culture that analyzes tone, posture, timing, and phrasing, communication becomes a chess match where every move is scrutinized by millions. At the same time, legal realities often shape what can and cannot be said publicly. Contracts, non-disclosure agreements, ongoing negotiations, or potential litigation can all limit how much information surfaces. To outside observers, those limitations can look like secrecy. But in many cases, they're simply standard protections built into professional environments. The public may interpret silence as concealment, while insiders understand it as procedure. This tension between perception and reality is where narratives become especially complicated. On one side, audiences feel entitled to transparency, especially when influential figures are involved. On the other, organizations and individuals operate within legal frameworks that restrict disclosure. Neither side necessarily intends deception, yet the gap between expectation and explanation can make it feel that way. Another factor fueling momentum is timing. When multiple headlines, announcements, or controversies appear close together, people instinctively connect them, even if they're unrelated. Coincidence rarely satisfies curiosity. Patterns feel more meaningful than randomness, so observers often construct timelines that seem to reveal hidden sequences. Sometimes those timelines are accurate. Other times they're simply compelling interpretations layered over ordinary events. Media ecosystems also play a role. Different platforms reward different kinds of content. Long-form investigative reporting tends to prioritize verification and sourcing. Short-form viral content often prioritizes speed and emotional impact. The faster a claim spreads, the less time there is to examine it. And once an idea gains traction, correcting it can be far more difficult than spreading it in the first place. Retractions rarely travel as far as revelations. For the people at the center of such storms, the experience can be surreal. Their personal and professional lives become topics of public debate, analyzed by strangers who have never met them. Every past interview is revisited. Old photos resurface. Archived clips are replayed and reinterpreted through new lenses. It's like watching your own life turned into a documentary narrated by millions of voices at once, some supportive, some critical, and some convinced they've uncovered truths no one else sees. Yet for audiences, the attraction is understandable. Humans are storytellers by nature. We seek narratives with beginnings, middles, and endings. We want motives, causes, and resolutions. When reality doesn't provide a clear storyline, we instinctively try to build one ourselves. It's not deception, it's curiosity mixed with imagination. Still, there's a difference between curiosity and conclusion. Curiosity asks questions. Conclusions claim answers. And in situations where verified information is limited, jumping from one to the other can blur the line between investigation and assumption. That's why the most important skill in moments like this isn't speculation. It's patience. Waiting for confirmed information may not be as thrilling as chasing theories, but it's the only path that leads to clarity rather than confusion. Truth rarely arrives as fast as rumor, but when it does, it carries something rumors never can: certainty. And right now, that certainty is exactly what everyone is waiting for. Because until it arrives, the story isn't finished. It's still unfolding.
How she feels. She feels like blogs and online platforms don't touch what she's saying, and they don't cover all of her words fully because it's Jay-Z and Roc Nation.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have no idea about their business, but if someone owed me $200 million, then I would be in court, not on X. And I guarantee you, if she ever took that to court, that would be a huge...
Part 12 here is where the gravity of the situation should really start to hit. If Nicki Minaj's allegations are true, and the connections she's implying hold any weight, then we are dealing with a system that isn't just about competition or business, it's about control at the highest level. Careers aren't merely influenced by market trends or fan reception. They're actively manipulated by people with the power and influence to shape outcomes, decide who thrives, and determine who disappears from the narrative entirely. Aaliyah's tragic plane crash, when viewed through this lens, stops being just a devastating accident and starts to appear as part of a chilling pattern. A pattern where women who step outside of certain parameters or threaten the established order face consequences that are both immediate and irreversible. Minaj stepping forward now is significant because she isn't just talking about money or minor grievances. She's holding up a mirror to a system that thrives on secrecy, fear, and silence. She's positioning herself as someone who has been cheated, silenced, and pushed to the edge, and now, finally, she has leverage. The $200 million she claims Jay-Z owes her from the title sale is only the tip of the iceberg. The real power in her hands isn't financial, it's informational. If she truly possesses evidence tying him to events surrounding Aaliyah, then she has a tool that could unravel more than just one artist's reputation. She has a tool that could expose patterns of exploitation and control that have been operating in plain sight for decades. What's even more alarming is the silence that follows. Jay-Z's camp hasn't issued lawsuits, denials, or statements. The lack of defense doesn't just raise eyebrows, it screams volumes. In public relations terms, when a powerful individual is innocent, they mobilize immediately to protect their reputation. When they remain quiet, it usually indicates either a calculated strategy or the acknowledgement that too much is at stake to speak. This silence extends to Beyoncé's camp as well. If there were nothing substantial to hide, public rebuttals would have been issued. The absence of such responses strengthens the perception that the claims are at least partially credible and that those involved are bracing for what's coming. And the implications don't stop with Jay-Z or Beyoncé. The ripple effect could engulf anyone connected to these events: industry executives, label owners, managers, and other artists who may have been complicit in protecting this system. Careers could be destroyed, reputations permanently damaged, and the carefully curated image of untouchable power could crumble in real time. This isn't theoretical. In a world where planes, contracts, and public influence can be manipulated, even someone at the top isn't immune to exposure once the evidence surfaces.
She is, just her name alone just defines greatness, right? You know, like just her.
Part 2 of the story truly begins on a runway that should never have seen departure clearance. August 25th, 2001. A humid afternoon at a quiet island airstrip where the heat shimmered above the pavement and the air smelled faintly of fuel and salt. Parked near the edge of the tarmac sat a twin-engine aircraft that, on paper, was ready for takeoff. In reality, it was anything but. Years later, investigators would point to technical factors, human decisions, and overlooked warnings. At the time, though, none of that mattered. All anyone saw was a plane preparing to leave and a crew insisting everything was under control. Official records would later show the aircraft was significantly over its recommended weight threshold. Luggage, equipment cases, and travel gear had been loaded in a hurry, stacked and shifted until the cargo hold was packed tight. Weight calculations, if they were done properly, did not stop the process. No one halted the boarding. No one called for a delay. Instead, the preparations continued with the rushed energy of a team eager to finish the day and move on. The pilot assigned to the flight appeared confident, at least on the surface. He spoke with authority, reassured those around him, and projected the calm professionalism passengers expect from someone in command. Yet documents uncovered later would reveal inconsistencies in his background, questions about certifications, concerns about past conduct, details that suggested he should never have been in that cockpit at all. None of that was widely known in that moment. To the people standing nearby, he was simply the man responsible for getting them home. The official investigation, released months after the tragedy, described a sequence of unfortunate factors: excess weight, mechanical strain, and pilot error combining into a catastrophic outcome. It labeled the event an accident, tragic, unforeseeable, and final. That conclusion satisfied most observers. The public mourned, tributes poured in, and the narrative settled into history. But there was another perspective, one that never made it into the official report. The young airport worker who would eventually speak out had been only 13 at the time. He wasn't part of the crew or the entourage. He had no authority, no status, no reason to be noticed. His job was simple: move bags, follow instructions, stay out of the way. From his position near the loading area, he saw more than anyone realized. He remembered tension before the flight, raised voices, urgent conversations. He recalled someone questioning the cargo weight and another dismissing the concern. He remembered the artist herself appearing distressed, stepping away from the aircraft at one point, returning toward the vehicle she had arrived in. According to his later account, she didn't look like someone eager to board. She looked reluctant. What he described next was the detail that would haunt listeners when he finally told his story. He claimed that after a brief absence from view, she was brought back toward the plane in a state that didn't match the composed image shown in official retellings. He said she seemed unsteady, supported by others, her movements slow and unfocused. He insisted she did not walk up to the aircraft under her own strength. She was assisted, lifted carefully, as if she were fragile or exhausted. To him, it felt wrong. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just wrong in a quiet, unsettling way he couldn't explain at the time. Years later, aviation experts reviewing the known facts would agree on one thing: the aircraft should never have departed in that condition. Maintenance history showed prior safety citations. Documentation indicated previous concerns about the plane's operational standards. None of those issues alone guaranteed disaster, but together they painted a picture of risk that should have triggered caution. Instead, the flight went forward. That decision remains the most troubling element of the entire event. Machines fail. Humans make mistakes. But departures, especially questionable ones, usually involve choice. Someone signs off. Someone gives approval. Someone says, go. The official narrative framed the crash as a chain of unfortunate circumstances. Yet to those who study such incidents closely, chains are made of links, and links don't connect themselves. They are joined by hands, by judgments, by moments where someone decides whether to proceed or stop. The witness never claimed to know who made that decision. He never said he saw a mastermind or heard a confession. What he offered instead was something subtler, but far more unsettling: a description of the atmosphere. The urgency. The insistence. The sense that the flight wasn't simply scheduled, it was required.
Weirdo. I don't get no what you got in your head, that neural link. You'll never outthink me.
If the earlier pieces of this story revolve around timing and perception, then this chapter turns toward another force that shapes narratives just as powerfully as events themselves: money. Not rumor, not coincidence, not speculation, but the financial machinery humming beneath the surface of the entertainment world. Because in any industry built on global fame and billion-dollar brands, understanding the flow of money often explains more than any headline ever could. Public disputes over finances between artists and executives are nothing new. Contracts, royalties, ownership stakes, streaming percentages, these have fueled arguments for decades. Sometimes disagreements stay private, settled quietly in boardrooms with lawyers and accountants. Other times they spill into the open, becoming public spectacles that fans dissect like courtroom dramas. One such dispute has recently captured attention because of how loudly it's being discussed. A prominent artist has claimed she's owed a massive sum tied to a business deal from years ago. She insists the figure isn't symbolic or exaggerated, but calculated, precise, and documented. According to her, it represents not just money lost, but trust broken. She frames it as evidence of a pattern, one she believes reveals how power operates behind closed doors. Now, it's important to separate what's confirmed from what's claimed. There has been no court ruling validating those accusations. No official judgment has declared wrongdoing. At present, they remain allegations, serious ones, yes, but still allegations. In the world of entertainment disputes, claims often surface long before any legal resolution, and sometimes they never reach a courtroom at all. Still, the accusation has sparked intense debate, not because of its legal status, but because of what it implies about the broader system. The artist making the claim isn't just talking about a contract disagreement. She suggests the issue reflects something structural, a hierarchy where those at the top control opportunities, narratives, and outcomes. In her telling, the dispute isn't isolated. It's part of a larger pattern she believes exists across the industry. Supporters argue she's brave for speaking out. Critics counter that public accusations without documented proof can be misleading or harmful. Observers who fall somewhere in the middle note that financial conflicts between artists and executives are extremely common, especially when deals involve evolving platforms, shifting valuations, or complex equity arrangements. In other words, disputes don't automatically signal wrongdoing. Sometimes they simply reflect the messy reality of business. What makes this situation stand out is the way it's being framed rhetorically. The language surrounding the claim is dramatic, almost cinematic, suggesting hidden structures and unseen forces. That tone has amplified public curiosity. People aren't just asking whether money is owed. They're asking what the accusation says about influence, leverage, and control. Because in entertainment, financial power often equals narrative power. Those who control distribution channels shape which songs get promoted, which artists get spotlighted, which projects receive funding. That influence doesn't necessarily imply corruption. It's simply how industries function. Decision-makers decide. Investors invest. Executives strategize. Artists create. Each role carries its own authority. Yet tension arises when creators feel the balance tilts too far toward the corporate side. When that happens, disputes can transform from private negotiations into public battles over principle. Suddenly, the argument isn't just about numbers. It's about fairness, respect, and recognition. Observers have pointed out that high-profile conflicts like this often become symbolic, representing frustrations shared by many others who never speak publicly. In that sense, even an unproven claim can resonate widely if it echoes experiences others recognize. At the same time, history shows that public narratives can harden quickly. Once a story gains traction online, it can feel settled long before any evidence appears. That's why journalists, legal experts, and careful analysts tend to repeat a simple reminder: allegations are not verdicts. Still, controversy has gravity. It pulls attention toward it. And attention, in an industry built on visibility, is a powerful currency. So now the conversation isn't just about contracts or percentages. It's about perception, about who people believe, about how reputations are shaped in real time by headlines, interviews, and social media posts. Because whether claims are ultimately proven, disproven, or quietly resolved, the narrative battle unfolding in public can influence careers just as much as any legal outcome. And that raises a question echoing through studios, offices, and fan communities alike. When a financial dispute becomes a public spectacle, who really controls the story, the people involved, or the audience watching? That question matters because once a narrative escapes into the world, it rarely belongs to its creators anymore.
Beyonce for sure. I love her. I love Beyonce. Jay-Z too, I really admire.
To really understand why narratives like this gain traction, you have to step back and look beyond any single claim or personality and examine the broader environment in which these stories unfold. Because controversies involving fame, influence, and power rarely exist in isolation. They grow out of systems, industries, cultures, and networks where relationships overlap, reputations intertwine, and perception can be just as valuable as proof. Entertainment industries in particular have always carried an aura of mystery. From the outside, they can look like closed worlds with their own rules, hierarchies, and gatekeepers. Opportunities often depend on connections, timing, and visibility, which can make success seem mysterious to those watching from afar. When people don't fully understand how a system works, they tend to fill in the gaps with theories. Sometimes those theories are grounded in truth. Other times they're built from assumption, coincidence, or misunderstanding. But either way, they spread because mystery invites explanation. History shows that powerful industries often attract suspicion precisely because of how influential they are. When careers can be made or broken by a handful of decisions, it's easy for observers to imagine hidden forces shaping outcomes behind the scenes. Add fame, wealth, and competition into the mix, and speculation becomes almost inevitable. Every rivalry starts to look strategic. Every setback looks intentional. Every success looks orchestrated. That doesn't mean there's always something secret happening. Often, the reality is far less dramatic than the rumors suggest. Success in creative industries usually comes from a combination of talent, timing, marketing, collaboration, and persistence. But those factors aren't as exciting as conspiracy narratives, so they rarely travel as far online. Drama spreads faster than ordinary explanations ever could. Another reason these stories resonate is because audiences naturally look for patterns. Human brains are wired to connect dots, even when the dots don't actually form a deliberate design. When two major events happen close together in time, people instinctively ask whether one caused the other. It's a survival instinct that once helped humans make sense of the world, but in modern media culture, it can sometimes lead to conclusions that feel convincing without being supported by evidence. There's also the emotional element. Fans form deep attachments to artists, actors, and public figures. They celebrate their successes, defend them during criticism, and mourn their losses. When something tragic or controversial happens involving someone admired, it doesn't feel distant, it feels personal. That emotional investment can intensify reactions, making theories or accusations seem more plausible simply because they align with how strongly people feel. Social media has accelerated this phenomenon dramatically. In earlier decades, information flowed mainly from journalists and official sources. Now it flows from everyone simultaneously. A single interpretation can circle the globe in seconds, repeated, reworded, and reshared until it begins to feel established, even if it started as speculation. The repetition itself can create the illusion of credibility. What's especially interesting is how narratives evolve over time. Early versions of a story might focus on one angle. Later retellings emphasize different details. New voices add new interpretations. Gradually, the story becomes less about the original event and more about the layers of commentary surrounding it. At that point, it's not just a story anymore. It's a phenomenon. That phenomenon often says as much about the audience as it does about the people involved. It reflects what people fear, what they suspect, what they hope is true, and what they distrust about powerful institutions. In other words, these narratives become mirrors, reflecting public sentiment back at itself. It's also important to recognize that real injustices have happened in many industries throughout history. Documented cases of exploitation, corruption, and abuse of power exist, and those realities understandably make audiences more alert to the possibility of wrongdoing. But that same awareness can sometimes blur the line between verified misconduct and unverified claims. Being alert is valuable. Assuming without evidence can be misleading. That's why responsible storytelling, whether in journalism, documentaries, or commentary, relies on a crucial distinction: the difference between what is known and what is merely suggested. Facts can be tested. Evidence can be examined. Claims, on the other hand, remain possibilities until they're supported by verifiable proof. And that distinction is where the real tension lives in stories like this. Not in dramatic accusations or emotional reactions, but in the unanswered question that lingers underneath it all: what can actually be proven, and what only sounds convincing? Because until that line is clearly drawn, the narrative remains suspended between suspicion and certainty, speculation and substantiation. And in that uncertain space, stories don't end. They evolve.
So what happens now is this is simply a civil complaint. And in a civil complaint, it goes through the technical legal process. Now, the distinction, Jessica, between civil and criminal, of course, is that civil is for monetary damages, right? The system can only reward you with money. There's allegations that this 13-year-old is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, suffered depression, etc. So now you go to
The web of connections surrounding this story makes it almost impossible to untangle without considering the broader context of the music industry, power dynamics, and the shadow networks that operate behind closed doors. What many outsiders fail to grasp is how tightly intertwined fame, influence, and control are in this space. It's not just about who can sell records or headline tours. It's about who decides which artists get opportunities, which projects get funding, and which narratives dominate public perception. The stakes are enormous, and when billions of dollars, careers, and reputations are on the line, the incentives to manipulate outcomes, or at least heavily influence them, are powerful. Nicki Minaj stepping forward in this scenario is more than a headline grab. It's a strategic disruption. She isn't simply airing grievances over unpaid funds or mismanaged deals. Her narrative suggests she holds knowledge that could illuminate patterns of behavior stretching back decades, decisions that shaped careers, altered trajectories, and in some cases, may have had irreversible consequences. This gives her claims a gravity that extends far beyond mere financial disputes. The real question isn't just about Jay-Z's actions, it's about the ecosystem that enabled them. And the fact that she is willing to speak publicly indicates that she either has sufficient proof to protect herself from backlash, or that she believes the risk of exposure is worth more than the risk of staying silent. The timing of her revelations is also critical. History shows that in the entertainment world, timing is everything. Moments of disruption can shift public perception in ways that are nearly irreversible. A single viral video, a well-timed post, or a corroborating witness can completely reshape a narrative that had previously been accepted as fact. And while many may dismiss this as coincidence or opportunism, patterns suggest something more deliberate. When multiple high-profile events align with a single person's rise or fall, observers inevitably ask whether chance alone is responsible or whether someone with influence nudged events in a particular direction.
I know so much on how you got where you are, how you stepped on many people.
The patterns revealed by Nicki Minaj's claims go far beyond a simple financial dispute or a long-standing industry feud. When you step back and analyze the timeline, the players, and the decisions made, it starts to look like a carefully maintained ecosystem designed to protect certain individuals at the expense of others. Take the history of tragic events surrounding women in the music industry, for instance. Left Eye's sudden death in 2002, Whitney Houston's shocking passing in 2012, both incidents were officially ruled accidents, yet whispers, questions, and inconsistencies always lingered. They were women whose careers were intertwined with powerful men, women who may have seen too much, women whose voices could have altered narratives. Now, Aaliyah's untimely death gets added to that disturbing list, but this time there's a person, Nicki Minaj, who isn't merely asking questions, she is claiming to hold answers. The difference between speculation and potential revelation here is enormous. Nicki isn't just a bystander or an observer, she is a participant who has been part of this world, who has direct experience with its internal mechanics. Her framing suggests that the cost of standing up, of asserting one's rights, or even just observing too much, has always been higher than the public could imagine. This adds a layer of urgency and gravity to her statements that goes beyond celebrity gossip. This is about survival, about power, and about what individuals are willing to do to maintain control. The financial aspect of her allegations is particularly damning. According to Minaj, Jay-Z not only manipulated contractual obligations to his advantage, but also actively silenced those who questioned him. The $200 million she claims is missing isn't merely about profit, it's a symbol of the lengths to which she alleges he would go to protect his empire. In a world where money, influence, and information are all currency, controlling the flow of these resources determines not only who succeeds, but who remains relevant and who gets erased entirely. The alleged title scandal, therefore, is a microcosm of a much larger system. It's a demonstration of control, manipulation, and the consequences of challenging authority.
After they are done with Diddy, Jay-Z is up next to be exposed.
Part 3 of Part 2 is about the flight itself, then Part 3 is about timing, and timing, in stories like this, is never just a detail. It's the hinge everything swings on. The tragedy happened in late summer of 2001. Within weeks, tributes flooded television screens, radio stations, and magazine covers. Candlelight vigils glowed outside venues. Fans replayed performances, interviews, and music videos, clinging to every frame as if memory alone could keep her presence alive. The industry mourned loudly, publicly, almost ceremonially. Executives issued statements. Artists spoke about loss. Producers promised her legacy would never fade. And for a while, it didn't. Her music surged again. Albums climbed charts. Unreleased material became precious overnight. In death, her influence seemed to expand rather than shrink. Commentators predicted she would remain the defining voice of her generation for decades, a permanent fixture in cultural history. Some even said the tragedy had sealed her status as untouchable, an icon no future star could eclipse. But the industry does not pause for long. It can't. Its engine runs on momentum, and momentum demands a next act. By 2003, less than 2 years later, the landscape had shifted. A new solo star stepped forward with a debut that dominated airwaves, award shows, and headlines. Critics called it inevitable. Fans called it destiny. Marketing teams called it a perfect launch. The album didn't just succeed, it ruled. Singles saturated radio. Videos rotated endlessly. Magazine covers multiplied. Within months, she wasn't just popular, she was positioned as the defining face of a new era. Most observers saw nothing unusual about that rise. After all, talent plus timing often equals superstardom. The public loves a coronation story. A gifted performer steps into the spotlight and claims her crown. It's a narrative as old as entertainment itself. But others, industry veterans, longtime insiders, people who had watched careers rise and fall from behind the curtain, noticed how seamless the transition felt. They whispered about how quickly attention shifted, how neatly one era seemed to close just as another opened. Not proof of anything, just curious symmetry. In entertainment, coincidence is common. Still, patterns have a way of catching the eye, especially when they appear too clean, too aligned, too perfect. There were also rumors, the kind that drift through studios and backstage corridors. Stories about who admired whom, about who wanted collaborations, about who had tried to get close professionally. None of it confirmed, all of it speculative. Yet rumors thrive in silence, feeding on gaps where facts should be. Photographs from industry parties resurfaced, snapshots of crowded rooms, famous faces, overlapping circles of influence. People studied them like detectives examining evidence, searching for hidden meaning in body language and proximity. Was that admiration? Competition? Strategy? No one could say for sure, but the images kept circulating, each repost adding another layer of interpretation. Lyrics, too, began to draw attention. Lines that once sounded like ordinary boasts or poetic flair suddenly felt different to those already suspicious. Words that had passed unnoticed now seemed loaded, as if they carried secret messages only hindsight could decode. Analysts dissected verses, debating whether metaphors were just metaphors or something more deliberate. It's remarkable how context can transform perception. A line written for rhythm can later sound like revelation. A casual photo can look like evidence. A coincidence can feel like design. None of that proves intention. But it does change how a story is told. Meanwhile, those who had personally known the late star spoke about her ambitions before the tragedy. They described plans, projects, ideas she wanted to explore, film roles, new sounds, creative risks. She hadn't been slowing down. She'd been accelerating. To them, her trajectory hadn't peaked yet. It had only begun its steepest climb. That's why the timing unsettled people who thought about it too long. Not because it demonstrated anything sinister, but because it raised an uncomfortable question. What happens in an industry built on momentum when one rising force suddenly disappears? Someone else fills the space. That's not conspiracy. That's gravity. Still, gravity can feel mysterious when you're standing inside the moment it pulls everything downward. And for those who watched closely, the shift from one reigning voice to another didn't feel like a slow turning of the